What do a toothpaste tube and a camera have in common with one of the most chilling pieces of history? Let's talk about the Sonderkommando photographs. I'm Garrett, feeling seriously intrigued today and ready to dig into this with a clear head.
I'm Leah, curious and honestly really ready to dive into something that carries a lot of weight and meaning. Welcome to Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett.
All right, let's set the stage for this one. The topic is the Sonderkommando photographs of Auschwitz-Birkenau from August 1944.
Picture this. I once stood in a Holocaust museum looking at reproductions of these exact images. They're blurred in places, a little skewed, and not what you'd call pretty photography. But that was the point. They felt like a heartbeat captured under impossible conditions. I remember reading that they might be the only photos taken from inside the gas chamber perimeter, and I just, stood there. The room got very quiet for me. Now, those frames have this haunting gravity, because you can tell someone risked everything to make sure the world would know.
Let's open the book on this with a couple quick definitions so we're on the same page. Sonderkommando were prisoner work units, mostly Jewish, forced to do the horrific labor tied to the killing process. That includes moving people into undressing spaces, removing bodies afterward, and handling cremation. It's the darkest forced labor you can imagine. Auschwitz-Birkenau was the extermination camp complex in occupied Poland where mass killings were carried out at industrial scale. So, when we say these photos are rare, we mean they're among the only images that catch moments near and even within the gas chamber perimeter at Birkenau.
Why do these photos carry such weight? Because they're direct visual evidence. They sit alongside something called the Auschwitz album, which is a set of SS photographs of selections and processing on the train ramp. But the Sonderkommando photographs jump the boundary. They show undressing in the birch grove near a gas chamber and open-air cremations when the furnaces couldn't keep up. It's like discovering a hidden diary that didn't just describe events but showed them, even if only in fragments. The fragments are enough to change how we understand the mechanics and the human cost.
So, here's where we get specific. In August 1944, 4 clandestine photos were taken near Crematorium 5 at Birkenau. 2 show deportees undressing among birch trees. One of those is misaimed and captures mostly treetops because the photographer couldn't safely use the viewfinder. The other 2 were shot from inside a gas chamber opening, looking outward toward the cremation pits. You can actually see a heavy black frame surrounding the scene, which researchers like Jean-Claude Pressac say is likely a doorway or window aperture. That blackness isn't some artsy effect. It's the interior of the chamber, and it tells you where the camera was.
Let's get to the heart of who did this. The photographer is often called Alex. Many historians identify him as Alberto Herrera, a Greek Jewish officer who was imprisoned at Auschwitz. There isn't a single definitive document tying it all up with a bow, but testimonies from researchers like Gideon Greif and Stephen B. Bowman and survivor Shlomo Venezia point strongly to Herrera. What's crucial, though, is that it wasn't a solo act. Alter Fein Zilberg, also known as Stanisław Jankowski, plus the brothers Shlomo and Josel Dragan and David Chmielewski all coordinated. Feinzilberg's recollections describe how they checked SS watchtowers, timed the shots, and spread out to guard the approaches. Chmielewski hid the camera in a bucket and even positioned himself on a roof as a lookout.
And the gear matters. Witnesses said the camera looked like a German Leica, which is a compact 35mm camera with a quick shutter, perfect in a way because you could shoot from the hip. But that also meant the horizons came out tilted, and one frame caught only trees. The rushed, skewed look is the fingerprint of danger. In the cremation pit images, you can spot an SS man with his back turned, which, not gonna lie, is chilling. It shows just how close the photographer was to lethal authority while trying to stay hidden in that dark interior space.
Okay, with that camera detail in mind, let's move on to how these exposures escaped the camp. The film was smuggled out in a toothpaste tube, which sounds almost like a spy novel, except it was all too real. The courier was Helena Danton, who worked in the SS canteen. That job gave her unusual mobility and cover, Along with the film, there was a note dated September 1944, signed with the pseudonym Stakwo by two political prisoners, Józef Cyrankiewicz and Stanisław Kozinski. It summarized the images as bodies by a burning stake and people undressing before gassing, and it urgently asked for more film. The note said the material should reach TEL, who was Teresa Wysocka Estre in Krakow, part of the underground network.
Why toothpaste, though? Because, it's mundane. A tube is soft, easy to stash, not suspicious in a quick search. And with Helena's position, the risk of carrying something small past watchful eyes went down a notch, even if it was still incredibly dangerous. The Polish underground, which is the resistance network operating under occupation, orchestrated moving that tiny spool of film out into the world. That move turned a secret inside the killing zone into evidence that could travel and eventually testify.
Then came the first public steps. In 1945, a Polish judge named Jan Sen included some of the images in a post-war report on Auschwitz-Birkenau. Early versions were attributed to David Chmielewski. That's how people understood it at the time. In 1947, one cropped photograph was exhibited at the Auschwitz Museum. Cropped is the key word here. A Polish photographer known as Mucha likely made the first prints and trimmed away the black margins, probably to center the figures better and make the scenes more legible. You can see the logic, but that decision, unintentionally, hid the very proof that the pictures were taken from inside the chamber's dark interior.
Fast forward to 1958, there's a Warsaw volume that publishes retouched versions, brightening contours so bodies stand out more. Again, it's trying to clarify for readers. But here's the trade-off. When you alter an evidentiary photo, even just to clarify, you also change the surface that historians study later. Then in 1960, a resistance member named Władysław Pytlik brought 3 cropped prints to the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum. For years, those were the baseline. Only after Pytlik's death in 1985 did his wife donate material that included uncropped versions. That's when curators realized earlier images had been trimmed and that the black frames mattered profoundly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Art historian George D.D. Huberman argued that the dark margins are part of the testimony. He said, in essence, the black is not absence, it's the gas chamber interior. It situates the camera inside the space of killing. By cropping those edges away, you unintentionally erase evidence of the photographer's risk and vantage point. Jean-Claude Pressac's technical reading supports that the opening was a doorway or window. And later, researchers like Christophe Cognet used sun angles and shadows to propose times of day, late morning for the undressing shots, mid-afternoon for the cremation pits. Igor Bartosik even suggested that some undressing images were taken through a Zyklon B opening about 2 meters high. That's the chute used to drop the poison pellets. If true, that would explain the downward angle and that misaimed treetop frame.
And just to keep our bearings, Zyklon B was a cyanide-based pesticide that the Nazis weaponized for mass murder in the gas chambers. Cognet's timeline suggests the undressing around 10 to 11:30, and cremation shots maybe 3 to 4 in the afternoon. That implies one transport photographed before and after. There's also this neat internal clue. A fragment of the undressing scene shows up inside one of the cremation images, which lets historians reorder the shots correctly. By the way, the museum catalog numbers 280 through 283 are reference tags, not the real sequence.
Okay, last puzzle piece in the chain of custody. After the images appeared in reports and displays, scholarship zoomed in. Dan Stone, a historian of memory and the Holocaust, wrote about the photo's history and cataloging in 2001. D.D. Huberman's book in 2003, later in English in 2008, reshaped the conversation about what these images can and cannot show. And across the board, names like Janina Struck, who studies photography in this context, and Franciszek Piper, a leading historian on the crematoria, helped knit together the technical, ethical, and historical threads. It's a lot of voices working to keep the story precise and honest.
Here's another angle to look at. There's healthy debate about a couple things: who exactly Alex was and the exact time interval. Many sources point to Alberto Herrera as Alex, but wartime secrecy and lost records mean we don't have the one perfect document. And on timing, David Smolevsky, who hid the camera and acted as lookout, told Jean-Claude Pressac in 1987 that all 4 shots happened in 15 to 30 minutes. Cognit's light analysis suggests hours apart. Memory versus forensics, right?
Totally. And I think there's value in naming. If Alex was Herrera, saying his name is part of honoring historical truth. It grounds the act of resistance in a life that had a before and, tragically, an after. Identifying him also helps us map connections: Greek Jews in Auschwitz, the Sonderkommando's internal networks, and his reported resistance, including striking an SS officer before he was killed. Names also keep the story from floating away into legend.
I hear that. And I kind of take the other angle. Even if the identity can't be pinned down to 100%, the act itself remains the core. A collective of prisoners coordinated a camera, took 4 shots under extreme risk, and got the film out. That coordination, lookouts, timing around watchtowers, hiding the camera in a bucket, speaks to courage and knowledge of Crematorium 5's routines. To me, that collective action is the heartbeat. If we never get the full legal name certainty, the meaning of what they did doesn't shrink.
Real talk. So maybe the middle ground is this: we keep pursuing the best identification because names matter, and at the same time we protect the integrity of the event. I also think the reordered sequence matters a lot. That fragment of an undressing scene embedded in a cremation image is like a breadcrumb. It practically says, first people in the birch grove, later bodies were burned in open pits when the crematoria were overwhelmed. That aligns with testimonies about numbered hooks in undressing rooms to keep people calm, and the switch to open-air pits during peak deportations in summer 1944.
So, why did early editors crop and sometimes retouch? I mean, they were prioritizing legibility. They wanted the human figures to read clearly on the page, especially in the 1940s and 1950s, when print quality wasn't always great. But the side effect is that the black margins disappeared, and with them, the obvious clue that the shots were taken from the chamber interior. Later, with the uncropped versions coming to light in 1985, curators and scholars reassessed how to present these photos without unintentionally muting the act of resistance itself.
Switching gears just a little, these photographs and the Auschwitz album are everywhere in educational spaces and documentaries. They're central to how many people visualize the process, even if each set shows a different phase. The Auschwitz album shows selections on the ramp taken by SS photographers. The Sonderkommando set is rare, prisoner-made evidence that peers into the killing infrastructure from painfully close range. Together, they give a visual arc that words alone often struggle to carry.
All right, here's the counterfactual that kind of blew my mind. What if the SS had discovered the camera in the moment? The most likely outcome is execution on the spot and the destruction of the film. If those frames never left the camp, we'd lose some of the only visual proof from inside the gas chamber perimeter at Birkenau. Historiography, which is the study of how we write history, would be missing a powerful piece of nonverbal testimony that's helped courts, museums, and scholars explain what happened.
Let's imagine that for a moment. Without these images, we would still have survivor testimonies, documents, and material remains. But a photograph has a way of collapsing distance. It's not because photos are more honest by default, it's that they anchor abstractions in a scene. If these frames didn't exist, I think public understanding would lean even more on texts and diagrams. That might make it harder for many people to grasp the proximity of the killing spaces, the rush and blur, the literal darkness around the act of taking the shot. The human mind remembers pictures. Losing these would have left a different imprint.
And I'd add, without these photos, our view of resistance inside the crematoria might skew smaller. The operation shows a collective effort under watchtowers and patrols, not just an individual's spur-of-the-moment gamble. You can feel the planning in every crooked horizon. If those pictures vanished, later generations might think resistance in that zone was almost impossible or purely hypothetical. Instead, we can point to the frames and say, this happened, and it involved many hands.
So, there's your big picture. 4 photographs, taken in August 1944 near Crematorium 5, 2 from inside a gas chamber opening, 2 outside among the birches. A clandestine camera, likely a compact Leica. A team of Sonderkommando coordinating lookouts, timing, and concealment. A toothpaste tube and a resistance network that moved film, and a note dated September 1944 into the world. Early cropping and retouching that shaped public memory, and later scholarship, Didi Huberman, Presak, Cognet, Bartosik, and others, rebuilding the context around the black margins and the sun's angles. It's a story of evidence and quietly of courage.
All right, that ties it up nicely. I'm grateful these images survived, and for the people who risked everything to make them. Let's carry that with some care today.